Greetings from the International Council for Small Business. My name is Ayman El Tarabishy. I'm the President CEO of ICSB. I'm also Deputy Chair of the Department of Management at GW School of Business. Okay, and we have live transcripts on, so this is going to be well. I see a lot of familiar faces here, so I want to welcome you all to today's session here. But before we officially start, we have one urgent order of business. If I am correct, today is Dr. Katia Passerini's birthday. And if it is or it's not, it's close enough. I know it's either today or yesterday, but Katia, happy before or belated birthday. It's close enough, so we want to wish you.
It's close enough, Ayman. It's close enough.
So let's all congratulate Katia. She's joining us here on her week-long birthday celebration. She takes a whole week for her birthday, so we'll go with that.
I might take the whole month, but let's get there.
The whole month. But let's go officially start. Let me first introduce our dear colleague and the main driving force behind the book, The Future of Business Schools, and Dr. Rico Baldegger. Dr. Rico, greetings, and the floor is yours. Why don't you welcome everybody?
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Ayman. Thank you to all, for, let's say, this webinar. Clearly for the book, we have several, let's say, editors in, like clearly Katia Passerini, as co-editor, Ayman El Tarabishy, David Aldrich, Daphna Karif, and Wilang Tan as, let's say, co-editors, and then we had more and more, let's say, co-contributors from, let's say, 25 countries, and more than 40 universities, and clearly it was a great, I can say a great journey, In one hand, even a little bit a great challenge, it's always good to have a challenge, and let's say to fulfill it, it's happy to a little bit to present today with Katia and with Ayman and with all the colleagues the book, I think then I have to go give back to Ayman, I think so.
Great, Rico, we'll get into the book and everything about the book, but first let's welcome Katia so she can greet everybody. Katia, you got a lot of birthday wishes here.
This is fantastic. I'm going to be celebrating for a month now, so that's great. Welcome everyone, wherever you are in the world. It's 9:08 here in New York City, so I look forward to this discussion. I would like to echo Rico's comments that this was a very interesting project, 18 months long or so, Rico. It from conceptions to implementation, and I want to really commend Rico and his team for having the stamina to bring it all the way to fruition. And I hope we'll have a great discussion today on some of the key aspects of the books.
So great, thank you, Rico. Thank you, Katia. And what we'll do now is we'll show a little presentation of the book to give you an understanding of the book, the context of the book, the main sections of the book, and then we'll open up for discussion because we believe that the book is a starting point for a broader discussion. So what I'll do is let me share my screen real quick with the slides, and then we'll go into the presentation. Let me see if you can get to see the book. Let me just make sure that you get to see it. And I believe you all see the book now, correct? Great, wonderful. Thank you. So the book title here, and I have a copy of it in front of me, and it's called The Future of Business Schools, Purpose, Action, and Impact. And as Dr. Rico mentioned, we have many co-authors, including David Aldrich, Daphna Karif, and Wilang Tan on the book, but for purposes of today, we wanted to keep it consolidated to us three, but of course, we'll probably be doing more webinars and getting into the chapters and the sections more. So this is the book, it's available, but why don't we go ahead, and I just mentioned our authors here, our co-authors here, and so we are delighted that Rico has approached us on the book, so I'll give it a little bit to Rico to talk a little bit about the reasons of the book, the authors, and everything. Rico, why don't you set the context for us?
Okay, thank you, Ayman. Yes, why the book? I think it's like a lot of you, let's say, working in business school, let's say we are aware, let's say that we have to rethink about, the role of business school. And business school plays an important role in a lot of economies, and I had in the last 10 years always, let's say, a little bit this kind of discussion, what will be in the future, the role of the schools. It is really how we can impact, more societal impact creating and environmental impact, what are some special values, and at the end, there was the starting point. Or I can even say, reflecting to our situation at the moment in Switzerland, to avoid some managers like acting in Credit Suisse, is that we have, let's say, not this kind of negative impact or negative reputation, of business schools. One of our, let's say, reflection was starting the book was, not only to think about a school for business, or even to think about a school for business and society, and I think that was quietly the most important part, to discuss about it, and clearly, even in relation to COVID, let's say, what will be, let's say, the way to educate in the future, what we have to change, what we have to keep, and to give a little bit, I can say, a wrap up, of the topic, the book is not a solution, but never the idea of to put solution in, but a little bit to cover topics like here, what is mentioned on the slide, in relation to sustainability, or even in one hand, to think a little bit about, how we can deal or prepare, let our people better to complexity. I think that was a little bit the idea of the book, and at the end, to give, let's say, with the book some inspiration, some ideas, and I think it's from this point of view, let's say, seeing the book, and all the great contribution, I think the topic is fulfilled, and that's, let's say, we have to really, even in the future, to go back and forth, what you can, let's say, we can even say what we can learn from the past, to put it in the present, and in even tightly, how we can create it, even our own destiny, our own destiny as a professor, as a student, as a provost, you're seeing Katia. And I think, but even, let's say, to have an impact on our, let's say, for our stakeholders, Yes, that's a little bit in a nutshell, the idea of the book.
Great, thank you, Professor Rico. So now you understand a little bit of the rationale of the book. This is not a sudden decision that was made by Rico. This is something that he'd been extensively thinking about for years. So as he collected the co-authors, right, and Katia took the lead on this, we decided to break the book into, or to divide the book into 3 parts. And thanks to Katia Passerini, Professor Passerini here, these are the 3 parts, or the main drivers of the book. So I'll defer to Katia now to tell us a little bit about each part and the reason behind each part. Katia?
Thank you, Ayman. So we have framed the construction into giving an introduction on what's happening to business schools in general. So sense making, where are we? Where have we been as business schools, and where are we going? And clearly, because this book was conceived, delivered, and finally published right before COVID, during COVID, and delivered right after COVID, there is a lot of understanding that the world of business school and teaching business education has changed, moving much more to an online environment, an online framework, delivering education not anymore just in the classroom, but through hybrid or iFlex components of instruction. And with that flexibility, we have been able to actually reach the world. And I see that many of the people today are connected from all around the world. And that's what the authors who have presented chapters here have discussed as the future of business education, being more flexible flexible, being more distributed, and also being more international. There is actually a chapter in that first section that I co-authored, Sense Making in Business Schools, that deals specifically on internationalization of education. Now we still want to bring students across the world, but we can have that interaction before and after through our iFlex modes of operation, so that we're not connected only for a couple of weeks, but we're able to be connected throughout the academic semester. Possible future of business schools has to do a lot with what we see today in the environmental sustainability space. Sustainability in terms of financial sustainability, we have a lot of challenges in the future of the business schools, but we also have challenges in the future of our planet. So we deal with a lot of topics of what's the role of business schools in really guaranteeing sustainability of the world in the future. And topics such as ESG, environmental sustainability and governance abound in this section. And then finally, how do we measure performance? We have traditionally measured performance with metrics, quantitative metrics. We're business schools after all, but are there other indicators that we should be paying attention to? And so we look at empathy, resilience, emotions, emotional intelligence, all of these characteristics that enable us to understand complexity and preparing for uncertainty. How do we measure those? And how is the MBA changing to be able to help students learn their trades, their skills in quantitative analysis? There is a chapter that talks about the computational MBA in the last part, but it also talks a lot on how do we prepare the students, the next generation, for 21st century skills that deal a lot with empathy and understanding of the world. So that's the three areas that we have organized here in this section.
Thank you, Katia, and well eloquently said. So in a simple way, when Rico brought this opportunity for us, the challenge is, well, how do we divide it up? And the art of it all was, let's kind of get some sense making here on what is the business schools of today and what's going to happen. Then looking kind of in the forward is, what is the future going to be like? How do we imagine the future? And of course, if you cannot measure it, you don't know the impact. And that's where the performance comes in. And this is what Katia mentioned here. And the chapters were collected under these three different categories or buckets, if you may. And what I'd like to do now is move to the next slide and ask each author to tell us a little bit in depth about each section and their concept behind it, what they got out of the chapters being produced, and some ideas as well. So, so this is beautiful Geneva on the left on the picture. I personally picked it here just for Rico. So Rico, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Sense making and let's say complexity, you know, we have some contribution in relation to VUCA and let's say to close theory into practice gap, you know, quite interesting chapter on it, you know, how we can put, let's say, to have a good mix, you know, inside, you know, let's say business schools in relation to practice and theory. And this kind of interfaces, you know, I think the sense-making approach of the book is here more or less, you know, to always to look for interfaces, you know, interfaces between, let's say, theory and practice, or interfaces between, let's say, we can even here call it, you know, hybrid education, or interfaces between, let's say, how we could go to be local, but at the same time, let's say, international, what Katia mentioned just before. I think in this way, to give a little bit an idea on the sense-making approach, you know, or let's say, even, let's say, one chapter, you know, is, let's say, focusing on, you know, really disruptive, innovative business school, you know, really, and yet how we can really think out of the box, you know, and define your business school, you know, in a new way, you know. And I like to be honest, you know, you can imagine this week in Switzerland is quite busy, you know, after this kind of bank problems, you know, and I have a lot of interviews with journalists in relation, hey, what is your future? What is your sense as a business school? You know, what are you teaching to your students? You know, what will be this part of way? And at the end, you know, I, let's say, always, let's say, like in this, let's say, part of the book, you know, I came back and say, okay, we have to prepare, you know, the personal skills of the people, you know, and that they can deal with complexity. And I think it's to enhance, you know, the competences, you know, skills to complexity, let's say complexity management can say, and let's say to live with, let's say to live with uncertainty, you know, and that's quite like good insight from the book from different co-authors, you know, and from Europe, or let's say even people, let's say from the US, from let's say even from Asia, you know, in this way keep you a little bit updated, you know, what could it be. One chapter is even quietly, let's say, referring to an experience and to present data, you know. So you have both, you know, you have let's say empirical studies in the sense making part, you know, and let's say some concept, you know. And I think that was the idea of this kind of sense making in business schools.
Great, Professor Rico here. And I love the interaction of kind of making sense here, but also integrating it with the recent events that are happening in the banking sector in Switzerland and Geneva. And what is the role of the business schools? And that is a critical factor here. And maybe this chapter here raises the issue is that there's always continuous sense making, and as we move forward. Thank you. We'll open it up for questions after a while here, but let's go to the next section here, which is the possible future of business schools within the context of the Sustainable Development Challenges. And this is the section of the book that I was responsible for. And in this section of the book, we divided up into 3 subcategories, if you may, and humane entrepreneurship, ecosystem changers, and partnerships, which indirectly or indirectly refers to the 17th Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. So I've written some comments on this to just capture the excellent content of the book and also kind of where we're going with this. So I'll briefly read it to you just to give you an idea of how we're moving. And I believe all 3 topics are important topics and crucial to the success of any business school or any venture, right? And they are both humane entrepreneurship, which I'll talk about in a little bit, ecosystem changers, and partnerships. And I want to just mention Norris Kruger. When I mention ecosystem, I always think of Norris Kruger here, so I want to give him some kudos here. First, let's talk a little bit about humane entrepreneurship and what we mean by it. This is a concept that goes beyond just making profits. It means creating a business that has a positive impact on society and treats all stakeholders fairly, not shareholders, but stakeholders, which is something that is very important here. Humane entrepreneurship focuses on creating value for everyone involved in their business, including employees, customers, and the community. And that's critical here, because when we take this inclusive approach to how everybody needs to benefit is critical. Humane entrepreneurship, in the chapter, we discussed that requires a strong sense of purpose and a commitment to social responsibility. It means looking beyond short-term profits and thinking about long-term impact of your business on society, but focuses on both at the same time. This can involve creating sustainable products, supporting local communities, and promoting ethical practices. You can see that this aligns extremely well with what should be the role, what should be the responsibility, and what should be the future of business schools in this area of topic. Second, let's talk a little bit about ecosystem changers. A very popular word, ecosystems, but what is it? These are what we believe businesses that disrupt traditional industries and create new opportunities. They are not afraid to challenge the status quo and take risks to create innovative solutions. Ecosystem changers are often driven by a desire to create positive change and to make a world a better place. And I think all of us can experience now, we are living through what we call AI, artificial intelligence disruption that is happening. But for ecosystem changers, this is an opportunity, not a sudden impact of a negative consequence. It is something that we should be looking into to see how we can adopt it in business schools and the shareholders around us and the stakeholders. Ecosystems changes can have a significant impact on society. by creating new jobs. AI comes to mind as new job opportunities, driving innovation, and improving the lives of people around the world. I believe this is one of the main roles of business schools, to improving lives. They are often at the forefront of technological advancements and can transform entire industries. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about partnerships and under the section of possible future of business schools. It seems that they are partnerships and possible, and the future of business schools go hand in hand. Partnerships can also be a powerful force for positive change. By working together, businesses and business schools can create shared value and have a greater impact on society that they cannot do alone. Partnerships can also be formed between businesses, nonprofit community, government, and communities to address social and environmental challenges. And I believe this is one of the most critical roles of business schools, to be the place, that platform, the system in which everybody plugs in to create partnerships. In that future, it looks very bright and very rosy and very positive, but it has a lot of work and a lot of challenges with it. And I see Dr. Katia Passerini shaking her head because she's a provost. So that means she has to take all what I have said, put it in a metric to define performance of business schools. So I defer to her now. Tell us how we can do all of this.
Fantastic. And I apologize, there might be some background noise from my location. Well, the interesting thing about this set of chapters that you see in the last section of the book is that as much as we talk about performance, we're actually almost disassembling performance from the way we have measured performance traditionally. Because as I mentioned before, and as both Rico and Ayman mentioned in other parts of the book, the future is all about uncertainty and ambiguity. And so those traditional performance metrics don't work anymore and are not sufficient to prepare our students for the world of tomorrow. Among the many chapters that you see in these sections, all of them very, very interesting, there is one specific chapter that I really would like to point your attention to, because it's a framework that summarizes really the evolution of business schools from a traditional model to the future model. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this framework, which appears in page 203, because it really identifies how business schools have changed and where they're going, and therefore define the new set of metrics that we have to use. So let me start with the driver for the MBA creation. In the past was, well, reputation. Business schools all over the world tend to be very high reputation institutions. If you think about the French system, for example, there is a system of grande école of management, and therefore it's a very important reputational aspect of any university, and also increasing student numbers. Let's face it, business schools have always been the cash cow in many universities, especially in the after the mid-50s. Now that has changed. The change of business school is not so much count and generate money and prepare the next generation of hedge fund managers. We still do that, but we also focus on purposeful businesses. And so the driver for the MBA creation now is purpose. And what purpose does the business do? It's not just make money, but really make meaning. In fact, you will see that a lot of the measurements, also if we look at how ICSB is evolving, are more connected to the principle of responsible management education, the UN Prime framework, and Ayman before connected us to the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. So that becomes more of a framework that we use also to report our accrediting standard. In terms of philosophy, we're moving from business process improvements and optimization and internationalization to purposefully business in period of uncertainty and unpredictability. So when everything else falls, what do you do? And you recall what happened during COVID. We had a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, failing, and then the community coming together to help those local businesses survive and bring back the community together. So it's really all about purpose rather than just the large organization anymore. The typical students in this new future, traditionally we look at 1 to 3 years post full-time education. 50% of the students might be international. In these articles, both Davis and Thomas discussed that, well, we now are looking at 3-6-year post full-time education, more than 3 years of management experience, 70% of the students international, and that's one way that we're going to see the business school students of the future. On the other hand, we're observing, and this is a US phenomenon particularly, that we're also seeing a lot of students going directly from an undergraduate degree to an MBA, to the business school, to compound their broader liberal arts education with traditional management skills. So we see both trends. Traditionally, we were really growing with a full-time MBA. Right now, it's both full-time, but it's also part-time. In fact, a lot of the rankings are changing to really focus more on this flexibility going in and outside of the work environment, depending on how the economy is going, and also allowing what Stanford calls open loop learning, having an opportunity to learn, go back and work for a few months, apply projects, and then coming back to learn again and consolidate. But what is really interesting in this section is how the curriculum has changed. So for those of you who have done your MBA a few years ago, like Ayman and I, it was about management skill, managing people, leadership, managing markets, managing finance, cultural organization, strategic analysis. Now, if we look at the topics in which the MBA are evolving, they're really about exploring organizational purpose, navigating in your innovation and change, leading with integrity. Of course, data analysis and decision making. We have to be quantitative. There is an entire chapter in this section that talks about the next computational MBA. Creating sustainable value, understanding finance, and research in action. The key point on the chapter that talks about the computational MBA is not that we have to use quantitative models, but we have to use research models. So we have to use that way of thinking that we see typically in research methods, hypothesis generation, testing, and conclusion, embed that throughout our teaching during the MBA. So the role of research is increasing in our business school curriculum. The learning environment has changed from the typical classroom, that's why we learn, to online, in-person, informal settings. Last night I was coming off a meeting and I was listening to a course in leadership while driving my car. That's what the students expect today. It's also learning on demand. We need to be able to deliver and continue to do that, but we have to continue to create opportunities for collaborations and interactions. Like today, I hope that we will go immediately to interacting with the audience, because the way we learn today is not just the one-to-many speaking to the audience in front of you, but really engaging in conversation inside and outside of the classroom learning. And if you take each one of those points, you will see that then the way we will have to evaluate business school performance in the future is going to be based more on those changes and outcomes that are brilliantly described in this chapter.
Thank you, Katia, for eloquent presentation here. And so we're going to give you a little bit where you can find the book, and then we'll open up to questions. I'll give it to Rico to tell us exactly, and the book is available. Go ahead, Rico.
Yeah, in the best case, Baldegger online, you can even get at the moment until end of October, let's say discount 35%. Let's say for next 6 months, it's let's say an offering with special code. You could even send, put it on the chat, the code, what is the code BALD35. And clearly, can you even have a look on different chapters, you can even, let's say order, online chapters, only chapters, is it even possible to have a look on a chapter? So you have different possibilities in this way, you know, and go to, let's say, to the online websites, online, let's say, access, and that is quite easy to get, you know.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen here, and we're going to switch to what we call into discussion mode. And so you have two options: either you put your question in the Q&A section here, or you can write it in the chat section here, and then I will moderate the session here. So let me see what's available in the Q&A first. Paul Crook says here, purpose is to make meaning. And can we develop this, please? During the last 3 years, people have found that purpose of work is to pay the bills. Many have found that paying the bills does not give meaning to their lives. Katia is laughing, so I'm just going to give it to you first, and then I'll give it to Rico. What do you think, Katia?
No, I mean, let's be clear. I mean, if we think of Maslow hierarchy of needs, you first need the certainty of your ability to pay your bills, and so the security of the workplace. I agree. I mean, we definitely need to pay the bills first. However, that's not what keeps you in the job, especially in a job that now requires a lot of interaction at a distance, not together anymore. And so the motivation and for waking up every day and do what you need to do every day, it's really your ultimate sense of purpose. Are we changing the life of others? Is our work meaningful? How are we able to make an impact with new projects that, yes, impact the bottom line, but also impact the life of others? And so we have a generation of students that we see now that are really, really more focused on that, which means they still have to pay the bill, but after they pay the bill, they don't have to have the millionaire lifestyle. That's not a, you know, a destination anymore. The destination is really making impact on the people that we interact with.
Great, thank you. Let me ask a follow-up question this to Rico here. In leadership positions in schools, you have your board of trustees, your board of directors, and you set a vision moving forward for 3 or 5 year plans. This is what we call the 5-year plan, the 3-year plan, and so on and so on. And yet a major disruption comes in that turns things upside down, right? And to get the board back in, to re-articulate, to reframe, to reanalyze takes time. But the day-to-day, moving the school, moving the ship fast as possible, is left to the deans, to the directors that are in the daily interaction. What's your reaction to all these changes that are happening so fast that you have to actually continuously pivot, a word that's a lot of it used in business, but we can use it in education. How do you balance this?
Great comment or difficult question, you know, Ayman. I think it's important, you know, we have to change our leadership, you know. I think it's, let's say, it's an old-fashioned to a top-down leadership approach, you know, it's for me over, you know. We have, let's say, to integrate it, you know, not only on the management board, you know, but we have even better to integrate even professors, you know, faculty in strategic, let's say, decision, but at the end, even in fair commitment, you know. I think, let's say, we have to, let's say, build, let's say, a broader basic, you know, that we have like scanning agents, you know, to see where is, let's say, risk coming from, you know. And clearly, you know, in one hand, even, let's say, integrating students in this kind of discussion. But on the end, you know, to find a good, Katia mentioned just before, this kind of short time and long time perspective, you know, but typically, you know, for the short time perspective, even your staff plays an important role. You know, what is the quality of your staff? You know, your administrative staff, scientific collaborators, you know, how bright is their commitment to support you? You know, I think you need it, you know, and I see we're going in relation to collective intelligence, you know, if you can even say a little bit shared leadership style, you know. I'm not saying empowering leadership style, but we're going this kind of direction, and that we even, let's say, we have to be a role model at business school, you know, to, let's say, to show what we teach, you know. You cannot only teach shared leadership and transformational leadership and not to do it as a business school, you know, and I think that is for me the main change in the future, you know.
Great, thank you. And there's a question from Samantha here, and then I'll answer this one, but I'll then defer it to both of you. And what is the role of entrepreneurship centers, which includes accelerators, incubators, co-working, and the future of business schools? What do you think they could do to bring maximum value to society? Excellent question, Samantha, and also a timely one as we will examine them. And in my opinion, these centers, these institutes, and both practical or practice-oriented or research perspectives, I call them the windows to society. Those are the ones that can allow people, can allow alumni, practitioners, and small businesses, big businesses, to interact with the university through these windows, through these outlets. They are open to innovation. They are open to what we call the 17th SDG, which is partnerships, right? In which they can connect to a university, connect to a university center, an institute, a small business development center. And that's where the beauty comes in. I believe more institutes, more centers, more of those are needed in schools, because those are the ones that allow for practical implication, practice, and actually what I call a playground for co-creation between schools and the public and the government. In particular, in my section, that's why I jumped on it, I want to mention in particular a chapter written by called System Changers, for a new era of value creation. And it was written by Valeria and Fernanda and Diane Wells. And they talk a little bit about Ashoka model here. Now, Ashoka is a partnership, as you can see it, and it ties to schools. And if you are an Ashoka fellow, you also have a hat in the university. A wonderful example. I highly recommend reading this. And Katia mentioned something about while she was driving at home and listening to a leadership session. Well, in my chapter, Heather wrote a whole section, a whole chapter on partners in learning. And that can also open up different ways of learning here. Katia, you want to jump in on this one?
No, I wanted to underscore the Ashoka Fellows. Fordham University is here in New York City. There's a lot of work in that space. One thing that it's very important for the entrepreneurship centers, innovators, accelerators, incubators is even if you're not preparing the next, startup gazelle or unicorn, you are teaching a way of thinking to the students that no matter what decision is ultimately to spend their life in terms of the career that they choose, now that they have that way of thinking of innovation, finding ideas to test, launch and learn, and pilot test, learning about data and finances. And therefore, we need to understand that the opportunity that the entrepreneurship centers are open and will continue to open is really more about mindset than actual outcomes. Unfortunately, we're measured by outcomes. So if you look at the statistics of entrepreneurship centers and who's doing better is how many hours of entrepreneurship do you teach, and how successful are the companies that your alumni have launched. And that's a great indicator. But what it's more important for us is creating that mindset, even if they end up not opening a company, etc. I want to say something more because I see a question about the 3-unit per course, which is connected to what I just said about measuring outcomes in entrepreneurship by this credit hours model. The credit hour models, unfortunately, is very limiting. And it was created at a time where we really measured the learning by the number of hours that we were sitting on a chair listening to the professor. That's why the 3 credit hours model, 3 hours per week, and then you add it up. That model, as we are discussing, is passé. Is it going to change very soon? It's very difficult to say because all the financial aid system, all the way that we have constructed curricula and we have had them approved institutionally by the Department of Education is still based on this credit hours model. So I don't know if we're going to be able to innovate in the actual number of hours. What we need to be able to start doing is innovating within. So even if it's a 3 credit hours model, what do we do internally to separate it? So we maybe have one 1 hour that is in person and the other 2 hours are online. So that innovation can still happen, even if the model as a whole is going to take some more time to change.
Thank you, Katia. This was an excellent question by Alex DeNoble, professor at San Diego State University, and he actually has a new book out called The Entrepreneur Within, which we'll hopefully soon do a webinar with him. So Alex will host you soon here. But Rico, again, it comes to management here, and you're a director. There's this 3-credit-hour model that's probably going to come to you, and you're probably going to get students telling you, can I do 1 credit here, 1 credit there, and 1 credit on the plane, which adds to 3 credits, and let's add half a credit for coffee meetings. What do you tell these students?
Yeah, to these credit hoppers, you know.
Yes,
Yeah,
credit
yes.
hoppers.
But at the end, you know, I think we even see a little bit the new trend, you know, that we have more and more people, let's say, coming for competencies, not for credits. And that will be one of the new direction, you know. We just set up a program with seed stars, you know, in India, you know, to let's say for coding, you know. And then they will not receive a credit, you know, they will receive a short diploma, you know, building their competences in, you know. And for me, then at the end, you know, we have to ask the student, you know, are you here for competencies or for some credits? You know, I think that at the end, you know, there will be, we are, let's say, convinced there will be one of the directions in the future. We have offering both, you know, as a business school, you know, and even in this kind of discussion is a part of micro units, you know, micro units discussion, you know, but at the end, you know, we have to see what is the commitment and motivation for the student. And Katia said before quite an important point in relation to this mindset. You know, we have to create an entrepreneurial, a growth mindset that people are thinking on the long term, you know, not on the next bill. Clearly, we need both, you know, or on the next credit. But what is the vision of the student, you know, and that we have to, let's say, in my opinion, that is, let's say, the philosophy that we have to give to our student, and that we can have in one hand acting, let's say, operational, you know, but not to lose, you know, the long time perspective, you know, and not only a focus on credits. But you're right, Ayman, that is a problem. That is a challenge, you know. That we
So let me add to the challenge here, because the questions are getting heated up here, and Monica's asking a very tough question, and it's an excellent question. She goes, with regard to partnerships, which I think falls into my category, but I'm going to defer to someone else because it's difficult. And she goes, there are specialist course providers. We know them. We get them all the time in the email. They are not business school professors or educators, but deliver high-level content, leadership, emotional intelligence, entrepreneurship. I can even throw design thinking in, right? How will business schools partner with these similar, what we call knowledge outlets, knowledge creators and outlets, right? And to provide this knowledge for them, and in a partnership model, and how would that look like? Co-delivery, what about the credit hours? Are you gonna say, well, if you go take it with this institute that talks about emotional intelligence, which is not done by a professor, we'll still give you the credits. How will that work? And, you know, I know it doesn't work now, but, you know, what do you think, Katia? How would you have to decide this stuff? So
I know, and it's difficult. It's a very difficult decision, and I'm glad that you said it doesn't really work now. And I would say not that well. Meaning some of the models that have been applied, and again, this was a lot pre-COVID. It was this type of partnerships were being put together because we wanted to accelerate the opportunity to go online. And then COVID comes and we're all online. And so now we don't need those partners anymore to go online, because we have our faculty that has actually been able to embrace the new delivery. So the questions remain: when is it that you source internally, and when do you source from an external partner or providers? I mean, I strongly believe that you should source knowledge where it exists, the best possible knowledge. So if we can all listen to Nobel Prize winners, we're all happy, because who wouldn't want to have a lecture delivered by a Nobel Prize winner? But a lot of the learning is not just the transmission of knowledge, really. It's really the interaction that happens in in the local community, the local classroom, the local library. And those really need some leaders locally who are your faculty, who are the students themselves coming together and teaching each other. And that is very, very difficult to outsource. So the way I see the future of this partnership is maybe bits and pieces of knowledge that is, it's becoming more and more the 15, 20 minutes just in time. But then after that, a lot of discussion and a lot of the application that continues at the local level. And if we're able to do that, it will be a win-win.
Great, thank you. Rico, you have a best practice on this because you have engaged with companies in Switzerland that actually come to your school to not just to kind of teach, but also learn and engage with the students. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we will at the end, you know, if we talked before about outsourcing to work with company or not, or with partners, you know, it's quite clear. You know, we cannot outsource our core competences, you know, as that's clear, you know, so we have to take, you know, what partners could deliver, you know, new insights that we're doing with companies, you know, in a way integrating it in the part of, but at the end, I agree what Katia said before. We can say that content is not longer king. You know, it's the way how you deliver, let's say your inspirational teaching. You know, it's in one hand even so important, you know, but then we have to take, you know, we decide in relation to inspiration. Is the company an inspiration? We take it as a partner, you know. It is, say, doing copy paste we are not interested in. It's quite an easy decision, you know. In this way, we pick a little bit the best one, you know, what is really inspirational, what even our staff could learn, not only as a student, you know, it must be even an inspiration for the professor or for let's say, for researchers, you know. And this way, let's say, we have this kind of, let's say, decision about partnership, you know. But at the end, we have to keep our core competences in our business school, you know. You cannot give it out, you know. I think that is, let's say, the risk of this kind of strategy, you know, what we keep and what we not keep. And in the future will be even with, let's say, ChatGPT and all this kind of, let's say, directions, it will be even more a challenge, you know, what is your core competencies as a business school? And that you can, let's say, what you should to get outside, you know, and what you have to keep inside, you know. Hopefully it gives you a little bit an idea how we are approaching it, you know, but we can even say less is more, you know, even some great partners, you know, and no sleeping partners, only to put on your agenda, you know.
And very good. There's a question that is raised here, but I'll change it a little bit here. You know, Katia mentioned rankings and based on student intake and research intake. But what about this concept of measuring social impact, right? And how would schools measure their social impact in their communities? Is there such a thing as measuring social impact, or just their presence creates a social impact that does not need to be measured, quantified in numbers? And Katia, what's your thought on this concept of measuring of social impact or trying to identify social impact?
I mean, there are already, not specifically just for universities, but there are actually countries that have those level of social index indicators or the like. I'm thinking about work that is done by the World Bank in this space. Measurements are always difficult. I would follow what is happening in the ESG area, the environmental sustainability and governance metrics that are now at the beginning of, there is a competition between, you know, the big accounting firms on how do we measure our ESG, because ultimately we want to quantify and look at market trends around our companies who are ESG focused doing better in the stock markets because people care about what these companies think about the environment, how equitable they are in their governance structure, and et cetera. And there is a lot of research right now going on, and there isn't a single index and a single way to measure that because it takes time to identify an indicator, but it's not impossible. And so what we expect that will happen in the ESG is that we will consolidate ultimately one framework after the battles among the big four accounting firms ends. And that same framework is very interesting and could be adopted by schools as well. Impact on the environment, impact on sustainability, sustainable business, and impact on governance. How diverse are we as educational institutions? And all of those metrics could easily be adapted if they're valuable for us.
And I want to add something to this personally. And a while ago, I was having a conversation with an individual based in New York that was running a huge venture fund, one of the big ones there. And I mentioned ESG and I mentioned SDGs, and the reaction was negative, saying, you're adding more policies, you're adding more questionnaires, you're asking more matrices of this, and we're in the business of making money, right? And this stuff doesn't work. And I was surprised with these comments because I thought the light went on that these things can go hand in hand. But there is another side to this, saying all this stuff on ESG, SDGs, doesn't really matter. We're really after good, fundamental, sound companies that can generate a profit, that can generate revenues. I'm just throwing it out there because it seems that everybody's on the ship on ESG and SDGs, but there are some people holding out in the business world and in the capitalist venture funds that are saying, yes, but no. Yeah, we know it's here, but no, it's not. Rico, what's your reaction to this? Heck, you're in Geneva. We saw what happened with the banking system here. This aligns really nicely with measuring what are we actually measuring here?
Hopefully, it's a matter of time. You know, that is my hope. You know, we see in the last, let's say, even after in the last 10 years, it was not so a lot of learning. You know. And even today, ESG tools in this way, okay, they need acceptance. But we see typically in Europe now a little bit step forward due to problems, you know, by the pain point, you know, is so high in this way. But it's clear, you know, in relation for a business school, we have to take a focus on, you know, we have to be forward looking. You cannot only teach, you know, let's say stuff what is accepted today. You need even to teach to the people stuff what could be probably let's say a topic in 26. You know, that is our focus. And clearly this kind of venture capital perspective, you know, it's clearly it's a return on investment perspective, you know, that is one perspective. I accept it, you know, but it's not on the long time perspective in a good way. But we see typically here in Europe, it's now changing smoothly, the discussion. It's coming, you know, and hopefully it's only a matter of time, you know, but you're right, Ayman, you know, even if you set up here, you know, let's say programs in relation to sustainability, let's say it's not easy to get students, you know, it's still not supported by companies, still until today, you know. So this kind of brain ship is not here, you know, but that will be an important, let's say, way how companies, you know, we need the companies that's supporting our goals.
Great, thank you. And we'll wrap it up now because, you know, we want to keep it in an hour, even though we said 90 minutes, but an hour is sufficient. I think we captured a lot of it here. So what I'd like to do is give it back to Katia for some closing remarks, some things that she wants to kind of mention that she didn't mention about the book, about her views, and then I'll mention it and then I'll hand it over to Rico to give us the closing remarks. So Katia, and why don't you tell us what you think?
Yes, I think I want to close. I think it's Alex that posted this comment in the chat on the notion of reaching out to companies and to create new programs and disciplines. And Ayman, you focus on partnerships before. I think that's essential. One thing that I would like to encourage all of us who are in this domain to continue to do is, especially in creating new programs, there is always a partner. It has to be the right partner, like Rico was mentioning, but there is always a partner there from where we can create new ideas and be relevant to the students. And so I would encourage everyone to do so, and I apologize for the background noise.
No, that's great. And Katia, and let me talk a little bit about my way of looking at the book here. I thought the book title captures it all. the future of business schools. What's our purpose? What is the action that we will take, and what is the impact that we're moving forward here? And in my chapter that I want, the one that I worked with my colleagues here, and is with other people here, we notice that there's a lot of potential, a lot of opportunities out there, and yet there is no clear path. There's so many roads to be taken here, but there are certain fundamental things that we can all say that we need to have. One of them is a focus on humanity, on humans, on the well-being of humans, the well-being of humanity and the planet. This is not for discussion with what's going on with the world in terms of climate and the impact there. And two is that we have to acknowledge and accept that ecosystems are evolving fast and changing, and there's a role of leadership, and especially the young leaders that are coming into our ranks that need to create this new way of creating these ecosystems. And we mentioned Ashoka. I can mention other ones as well that are at the forefront here. The ILO with their youth initiative, UNCTAD, OECD. There's a lot of ecosystems out there. The United Nations. There's a lot of different ecosystems that we have to engage in, which leads us to this concept of partnerships. If we are not partnering with all these organizations, and believe it or not, we call them organizations because that's their title, but within these organizations are the people that we are working with, right? And so it comes down again to the human interaction of us working with other humans and other organizations. And that's the beauty of it all. Today's book is an outcome of humans interacting with others at different levels and trying to put together a plan. And technology was the facilitator in doing so. I remember the sessions that we were talking with Rico and the authors, and Lucia, Rico's assistant. She did a wonderful job in moving us forward here. And then Edgar, the publisher, and how they came up with it, and even the graphics of the book, right? Which we thank Katia for winning the best graphic here. So, and we give her full credit, and we celebrate her birthday for the whole month. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to now give it to the person behind the book, the aha moment, the epiphany of the book that got us all engaged. Rico, why don't you give us the closing remarks on the book?
Thank you for your remarks. Yes, I think at the end, a business school should be, let's say, a catalyst role. And that is really your chapters, even typically, what you mentioned before, let's say on human entrepreneurship is an important, let's say, topic. At the end, we have to love people. It's people business inside business school, and I think I'm really proud that we set off a book with strategic and operational insight. Not only, let's say, strategic philosophies, even operational insight, and it was really a pleasure, in one hand, to let's say, to coordinate with you the book, and even to have a discussion today, during the webinar, Yes, in this way, thank you for being here, and looking forward to have contact, to find the right partner, what you just mentioned before, Katia, and always ready to let's say, to connect, Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We will continue. We will probably have more on this book as we bring authors in to do a little bit more sessions on their chapters here. So this is the start of a year-long process of talking about the topics. This is just the start here. So I want to thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to engaging again. And stay safe and enjoy. Bye-bye, everybody.